Okay, hi everyone. I just want to say, do you remember before you went for lunch, Bill Fowler asked a question, why are we all here? There was one word, interoperability. So we've seen in so many of the presentations how interoperability is the key to everything because we don't do this alone. So we are here, and before we get started, this is the Interoperability Workgroup, myself and Chris Haran. Let's just read the antitrust policy. RESO strives to increase competition in the marketplace and will not be a form of anti-competitive conduct. The RESO antitrust policy governs the activities of RESO and its members, including this meeting. A link to the policy was emailed to you with the meeting agenda. Please consult RESO's counsel if you have any questions. Okay, so our agenda is in two parts. I'm taking the first part here, which is the introduction of cross-platform interoperability or interoperability. We're going to talk about some recent accomplishments, the typical kind of agenda or meeting that we have in our future roadmap for RESO. And then in part two, Chris is going to talk about something new and exciting called ActivityPub, potentially a new form of interoperability with a little presentation discussion. Okay. Chris, would you like to introduce yourself?
I'm Chris Haran. Nice to see everybody. I like to reuse slides over and over and over again, as you can tell. If you've come to a conference, you've seen this slide at least 3 times now, so I'll go for lucky number 4 next time, too.
Okay, thank you. I'm Catharine MacIntosh. I'm the CEO of Listed, and we're a Canadian real estate tech company that's a front end of choice for brokerages and MLSs, and we connect the consumer to the real estate market through their agent. Okay, when we're talking about the mission of the Interop group at RESO, this small single sentence really captures it. Our group is here to identify changes for real estate practitioners where systems don't interoperate and propose solutions. Okay, so it was actually Josh and Chris who were talking one time, and when Josh was a CTO of RESO, Josh Darnell, was explaining something to Chris, you know, they likened kind of the understanding of it to literally trying to jam a square peg into a round hole. So if you've ever had a Robertson screw and a Phillips screwdriver, you'll know that this is challenging. And so we want to take it to a higher level where actually the goal is beauty. The goal isn't having tools that work together. It's regardless of the tool, achieving the end goal through a common language.
And yes, Catherine did just say that Josh had to use baby toys to explain technical concepts to me. So that is absolutely true.
Right, we got to simplify. Okay, so first we want to talk about where we fit in with RESO. And if you can see on this slide, you're going to see this red box, which looks kind of tiny and in the middle. Yet we said, why are we all here? Interoperability. So it actually runs through the whole of RESO. And we likened it kind of to the nervous system of the body, where if you look at the very top, who forms the top of this pyramid are the RESO member organizations, right? So that's all of you. So you're kind of the brain at the very top of this whole organization, right? To interpret and process signals. And then the spinal cord is, in the whole model, the kind of communication system that goes down through the body. So you got broker advisory. So we're getting pain points on that journey, and these signals come back down to the various research and development group, R&D. That's a group that we often, when we get a pain point in interoperability, will then take it and put it over to another group, whether it goes to data dictionary, transport, R&D. So we fit within the larger whole, and RESO in its totality, if you can just see the lines on the side where this feedback loop is iterative and working back so we can always be progressing with change. And to get action, we actually need to get these things implemented. So you see creation and adoption down one side, but it needs to come back with implementation so we can then iterate. Okay. So if that's where we fit in RESO, who is interoperability? So the who of it is really this kind of signifier of pain points. So people come to us and in our group, and we look at where something is broken. So you can see on this diagram, every time you get to a little red X, you know that the signal is that something is broken. So when something's broken, they come to our group, and we see, where did it break down? Where are we speaking different languages? So just as an example of an idea of something like a protocol or a standard, where it makes a common language for us to work together, the internet. You know, we all have the protocol of a common language of www to access the internet, regardless of how or on what platform we do that. So interop is really a caregiver and a translator of the broken parts to bring synchronicity back to the whole. So since the fall conference, we've got 4 parts here. Payload tagging is an important part. It's pedantic, kind of like we actually get out a spreadsheet and we take terms, and Chris will say, what do you guys think about this one?
Catherine, that's the exciting stuff.
Super exciting, yes. And if you come to our work group on the second Tuesday at 12 or 3 Eastern or Pacific time, you can join us in that. But we have offer management, association management systems, appraisals, client contracts. These are all things that we have taken through a spreadsheet to see where we need to either make a suggestion to the data dictionary, where things align, where they don't, where the conversations are or are not taking place. And then that feeds into a best practices guide, which is a transformation of the stories and the business cases that either coming from broker advisory or from one of the other groups, allow us to then take these business cases and help you apply them and help us change the standards to implement them. So AI, its impacts and effects, it's undeniable that that's in the industry and happening right now. So that's one of the things that we look at is what's new, what's going on, where does that fit within RESO? Where is there, we heard earlier about how is RESO connecting to an AI standard and this kind of two-way conversation with how we are going to change. What are its impacts and effects? And then we have new opportunities and discovery. So when something new comes up and we wonder how it's going to affect our industry, you know, that's where we say, I don't know, how is it? And then we invite people to the work group. We hear at these conferences what's going on with you, and then we decide what we can do with it or which group it should go to next. So just to give you a sense of kind of the typical, you know, how we deal with standards and how it comes in the agenda is a use case is submitted. Maybe that's a pain point that somebody has. We always review the resources that are already out there, so we're not double doing. We don't want to make a resource if there's something that exists that a vendor or a MLS could implement. So we do that review, and then that's where the tagging comes in. So when we're tagging, then we're really getting into the details and comparing it. And then we make these incremental suggestions and approvals, and then we submit it to Data Dictionary. And it's always a may, not a must, so we're remaining flexible in this process. So this slide, actually, Chris presented 2 conferences ago, the last year's spring conference, so we won't go into it too much, but the reason it's up here is because in order to take and bring a pain point or discover how RESO can help, how a standard, maybe if you have a problem, can help you, taking and mapping your own system and how you relate to vendors. If you're an MLS, what are the various vendors and systems that you use to serve your members on the ground? And then we mapped out all the various RCP protocols that relate to the various parts of these diagrams, depending on who it is. So in this case, Chris was dealing with, you know, 3 different MLSs and how they related to rules engines and source databases. An example for us as a vendor is simply we recently had an agent and a brokerage say, you know, why is my profile, we're talking about unique licensee identifier as a solution here. An agent came to us and said, how come my profile is different on 5 different platforms, right? They're part of their association, they're part of a statewide or in Canada, provincial body, And wouldn't it be nice if just on their listed app, they could update their profile and it would synchronize everywhere? Just as an example of savings of time and efficiency. So part of the idea for the future is back to when we were talking about fitting a square peg in a round hole. You notice here in this photo, there's no fishing rod, right? But the fish are just jumping in, and the person is sitting and contemplating. So one of the things that technology gives us back is time, efficiency, and this synchronous communication with each other. So part of the idea here is what new technologies exist that would kind of eradicate the boundaries of platform miscommunication or where platforms get stuck, and just allow for this protocol, like we had the example earlier of the internet. What new protocols are out there? So I'm going to, I think, turn it over to Chris here for ActivityPub.
That's right. So for those of you who saw my out-of-office message for this conference, this is the sweet spot if you love talking about interoperability and are a big fan of Will Ferrell and John C. Reilly combo movies from the 2000s. So you're going to get plenty of gifts for that. Yes, we do want to talk about something that's new here. And part of the mission of Interop is when we do see an opportunity, we want to see like how could this technology potentially make getting information across systems more efficient, make it easier to flow through. And we always want to take the time to clear the bunk bed so we have plenty of space in our meetings to talk about these kind of things and go over what could be new and great. So let's talk a little bit about this. So one of the things, and I probably shouldn't even give him credit because I think he left, but Eugene had a line in his last presentation that really summed up what this is all about, which is that brokerages have to keep redoing integrations over and over again, right? Like that was a big pain point that he was talking about in there. But it's been echoed through a lot of the presentations today and yesterday. Like a lot of talk about all of the new products, all the new possibilities for MLSs, and how do we integrate, and how do we get past really custom integrations and a lot of extra work every single time. So that's where some of these pain points that we've been talking about, and a small group of us were going through, and like how could we maybe make this better, make this velocity pick up a little bit. Because right now you do need a lot of custom development, and it's not necessary to have large teams, but it's certainly helpful to be able to put together what you need to do to bring in all of these products and integrations into your system and into the ecosystem. Everything that would support the transaction. And because there's all these custom integrations, there's thousands of different businesses in the real estate industry. That's one of the things that makes it great, right? So many different agents, so many different business models. But one of the side effects of that is it can be a high barrier of entry for innovation to come in, for people to be able to build and add new products in, especially if they don't have the domain knowledge, if they're not already built up in the data ecosystem. So those high barriers of entry, some of you may recognize this slide. This is from several years ago. And like I said, I really love doing this presentation because I just copied and pasted a bunch of slides, because it's not just because I'm lazy. That's a big part of it. But it's also because that point still holds from when we talked about this several years ago. This was a slide where I'd actually talked to one of the top agent teams in Chicago. And I'd asked him, how many systems do you use on a regular basis that you have to push your data through? And he counted 34 to take care of one transaction that he used. 34 different systems. And most of that was downloading data, re-uploading data. And that was really what was driving this whole interoperability conversation, even when I was on the brokerage side. But you can see like all the different places that the listing goes. It's not just the MLS. There's a lot of different pieces that go into a listing and turn a listing into a transaction. So as an example, even before it gets the MLS, we have transaction management. That's usually actually where most people start, right? You're doing the listing presentation, and then you're filling out the forms, you're putting them into your CRM, and then you're starting to put together your pre-marketing and marketing, getting that all ready. Then it goes into the MLS, and that's the inputting of the listing, getting that ready for syndication and data delivery. But then after that, you got to go find the buyers. So then you have all your consumer sites, you have the showings going on, the offer management, you're collecting earnest money, and then even post-transaction, all these different systems there. So I say all that because what Interop does is we actually spend a lot of time talking about the systems that talk to each other rather than talk to the MLS. There's a lot of other groups who do MLS to vendor and vendor to MLS. We actually do a lot of vendor to vendor that helps support that transaction. So we started with transaction management systems. We've talked a little bit about offer management. But all of this is like, again, a bunch of competitors who need to cooperate to make this work, and it's custom integrations basically over and over and over again. So we always like to rip off and duplicate from other industries. If we can steal it, even better than having to invent it from scratch. And we're looking at something like social media. Not to say that we want to make real estate like social media, but social media is very easy to publish content, to share content, to distribute content. Probably more importantly, that ecosystem makes it very easy to build apps and products that are attached to those as well too. So you have your core system, but then a bunch of apps and things that live off of it. And a big part of the reason why is because it's more about the protocol over the platform, meaning there's a protocol they all share in addition to having the standards like we have today. And that protocol makes it really easy for anyone to come in, and this is not just social media, this is most digital industries, for anyone to come in and build apps and be able to create new experiences, new products, new services without having to have a ton of domain knowledge, without having to have huge teams, without having to spend a bunch of money to do it either. So ActivityPub is one that we've been looking at, and like I said, there's been a group of us that have been talking about this for a couple of months, and it got to a point where we felt like there was enough there to talk about with RESO. We actually brought it up in the Interoperability Workgroup last month. They got a little bit of a test run of this presentation and wanted to float the balloon to see if it was interesting. But how many people here have heard of ActivityPub, first of all? Anyone know this? We got 1, 2, excellent, 3. Okay, so we'll have a lot of links later that you can go and take a look at it. But the core idea of ActivityPub, it's a bunch of, it's a decentralized system. So everyone has their own server, very much like the MLS network today. And those servers have actors, and those actors can send messages, they can receive messages, very much like email or posting on social media. And it makes it very lightweight and simple, but probably more importantly, it's very repeatable actions for every type of integration that would be in that ActivityPub instance. So that pain point earlier that I mentioned that Eugene said, where brokerages constantly have to build custom integrations and MLSs have to build custom integrations. Something like this gives you a protocol where you use the same setup every single time and repeat those actions over and over again. So it makes it a lot easier to build not just one product, but multiple products. And there's other instances there that I'm going to talk about in a little bit. But this is kind of the basic idea of ActivityPub. That's the website. Like I said, we'll have more links later. But the reason why this is really interesting to us is it's not a RESO presentation for us unless we have a data flow diagram. So this is kind of the ecosystem as it is today. And you can see that RESO is filling in the gaps really well around the MLS with things like webhooks, things like the common data format, and everything, RCP 010 for listing ad edit. But there's a lot outside of that that happens that has opportunity for us to support and make easier and also pull in more into the core part of the transaction. And actually that part on the far right, the buyer workflows, that's actually where interoperability has spent a lot of our time. It's talking about how we get some better data flow between systems on that side of the diagram. So that's what we're looking at here is ActivityPub something that maybe could fill in those gaps outside of where RESO's at and help make that transaction a little bit more efficient. So this is a sample conversation. And that's why I think this is really interesting, because if you think about a typical transaction, it has a lot of parties that are involved in it, right? You've got obviously the listing agent, that's Bob at the top here. So Bob here does a hashtag, this is my pre-marketing, I'm getting a listing ready, right? But then he tags his AI photo app. He wants them to do his image recognition so he can get his photo title sent back. He tags his county assessor because he wants to have public record information to auto-populate in the listing. Those two reply back, say, here's your link in the RESO common format with your image tags, and here's your link with the public record data. Bob puts that into his listing, and then he sends a notification to his MLS. Says, hey, I've got a listing that's ready to go. Can you take a look at it? MLS takes it, runs it through its rules engine, says, good to go, you're published on our site. And then you can go in a lot of different directions there, but the other two examples we wanted to show was further on down in the transaction. We're getting closer to closing. Maybe you have a showing app, and that showing app, you have a request from the other agent, which would be Amy in this case, and then you have a confirmation that the showing's scheduled. And then you have the offer app saying, hey, I love that house, I want to make an offer on it, offer accepted. The reason why this is interesting is we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different systems, 3 different parties, and it's still the same activity all the way through. So this custom integration that we're talking about goes away with a protocol like this. That's why this is so interesting. And Alex, I don't know if Alex is still in the room, but hey, Alex a couple years ago, and I told him, hey, it only takes us like 3 years to get around to your problems, but we get there eventually, brought up this exact thing. Like he was really worried, he was having a lot of trouble with custom integrations, mainly around single sign-on was what he brought up, but he was actually on stage and talked about it as part of our group. And this is potentially an answer to that kind of problem, which I find really, really interesting. So this is just a sample of it, but you can see where the power of this could be, of how simple it could make this to not just create listings, but then modify them, enhance them, add data to them. I mean, imagine if we had public record and AI in here, but Bill mentioned environmental data. Imagine you pinged like your municipality, and they give you specific environmental data that you could add on here. And maybe that data is added in the MLS, maybe it's added later on, but I think it's a good way to continue enhancing and adding more and more to that listing, giving it more content, and ultimately creating more data for not just the agents, but the customers they're serving too. So it takes a transaction and turns it into a conversation. And we talk about the 2 C's of MLSs, and maybe the new C is collaboration. Can we, in organized real estate, help put this kind of protocol out there, because we could then bring in so many other people that are not directly involved on the MLS side of things, but are directly involved in the transaction? Could we get some of those companies that maybe aren't in the room today and make that transaction tighter, make it more efficient, and ultimately that would make it better for the agents, the brokerages, and their customers if we've got them all in that same conversation talking with each other. So you have that cooperation and that collaboration. So we'd like to brainstorm some ideas. Unique listing ID was talked about yesterday in the R&D group, and that's something that MRED is extremely interested in. We've already, we're part of the test group, we've built some stuff out, but we've also looked at like how are we going to, when we set up our node for ULI, how are we going to ping the other nodes to find out is this agent existing there, and then if it isn't, how are we going to generate the ULI and then publish that ULI everywhere else. And we are looking at ActivityPub as a possible implementation for that, because it seems like a very simple, straightforward way that doesn't have an established protocol quite yet. So that could be a way for us to verify and validate that ULI through something like ActivityPub. And then listing advertising. Maybe there's channels outside of traditional syndication IDX. We already handle that today. But there are other places that agents or brokerages could promote their listings and use something like this to push that out there. Listing publishing, listing modification, we already talked a little bit about that. There is so much data out there. We've got all the AI talk that we've had throughout the last 2 days and what kind of data that might create as well. How can we continue to layer that on and make it easy to make it part of the listing without having to go through integration after integration? So those are just some ideas, but that's part of what Interop is going to do over the next couple of meetings is we're going to talk about what ideas, what other things could we do with this protocol potentially, and then maybe get some implementations and see if it actually works. So like I said, there was a small group that worked on this, and I will say not all of these people would say they definitely sponsored this idea. We've got some big proponents of it, but everyone contributed, whether it's designing or putting together wireframes or mock-ups, or sometimes just poking holes in it too. Like there's a lot of back and forth conversation about what we could do with this and what ideas could fall in there. So I just want to give a quick shout out to everyone on that, because we had some really good conversations over the last few months about how this could potentially work out in the industry. So when these files, or when these presentations get shared later, this is a whole list of links. So for those of you who want to do a deep dive and learn more about ActivityPub, a bunch of stuff here to kind of go through it and understand how you can set it up. They've got instructions on how to set up your server, how to put together responses, some of the different implementations that are already out there, and some other interesting considerations too. At RESO and at Interop, we always believe in having action items in every meeting. We want to make sure we keep moving things forward, that we want to have going, we want to have progress. So I will say for ULI, I know that transport is going to be covering this ActivityPub as potentially the method for delivering ULI. So if you're interested in the more technical aspects, definitely be a part of that group. And I think they are covering it tomorrow as well, but then in future meetings, they'll be talking about that too. So MRED will be contributing whatever we do in this to the transport group to talk through that. And then if you're interested in not just listing publishing, but all the other ideas, so all up and down that transaction, how can we add more data? How can we make it easier to integrate other players into our ecosystem? We're going to talk about that for probably the next meeting or two, and we'll see what we can come up with, and it may very well be that we have to kick it to another group, because Catharine mentioned that earlier. There's plenty of times where we get an idea in our group, and we're like, that's really not appropriate for us, so it's got to go to R&D, or it's got to go to transport, and we're happy to kick that can down the road. But we do want to kind of tease out some of the ideas here, and then see if anyone wants to do an implementation and see if it actually works, because that's ultimately what this is all about. Is it's not just talking about it, it's doing it and saying, is this something that's helpful for everybody? So if you're interested in that conversation, definitely would love to have you join us. We've got a great group, very fun. We do a lot of deep dives on very big ideas, and we definitely want to hear your voice as well. So we've got a few minutes, and I hesitate to say this because it goes super technical. I'm not going to answer them. I'm going to send you a transport, but questions. Josh? So that was transport. I'm going to talk a little bit so Sam can get up with them because we have another question up here. Transport.reso.org is where the proposal's at right now. So if you wanted to take a look at it and see some of the examples and what they're thinking for the ULI, that's a good place to go check it out. So, right. Oh, and come.
Excellent.
Let's make sure we get these on for the live stream as well.
Yep.
How do you see permissions and visibility working in the ActivityPub situation?
I'm going to come grab the mic.
Okay,
There.
yeah.
Yeah, Josh, we want the online people to hear you. So, yeah, so Josh was saying it uses the same OAuth that we use right now. There is definitely a couple of links in that slide deck that talks about security and gets into some of the other areas there, but yeah, Josh, if you want to talk through that real quick.
So yeah, those URLs that you saw on the prompt there for the conversation, those are just URLs to the current servers we have in the industry. So if you have a web API server, you've already done the data mapping, none of that data is actually published in that thread. It's just a link to the URL. And so any of the permissions and authorization that we do now just stays in place. Nothing changes.
And I will say, part of the conversation idea that I think is interesting is that you can have people follow you, but you can choose to not have them follow you. You can tag the people that you want the information to go to, or you can decide that you don't want to send them that information. So it's the permissioning part of it is like the control is in whoever's creating that content, which I like that idea a lot in that you could have a little bit more control about where it goes and who's getting it. So not getting just delivered into the wind. You could set it to be open, for sure. Like that's definitely one of the options there, but you can have a lot more direct input on it too. So.
Yeah, you could have your own private subset of nodes. You could have your own private, I'm not saying private network, but private subset of nodes. So the Bay Area, for example, they have 7 MLSs. They could have 7 that just share their data in those nodes. Nobody's following everybody, right? So the access is kind of fine-grained controlled. If you want it, it could be everybody follows everybody too. But it's very flexible. It could go either way.
Yeah, it's really nice that you can follow what you want to follow too, so you're not downloading the ocean. You can really be particular. Yeah, and I think just as a takeaway, it's so powerful, the idea of protocol over platform. I mean, I think if there's one takeaway, it's that idea that you're actually removing the platform, so it makes, if cooperation and this idea of collaboration is the new idea, then a protocol really helps it because it removes any boundary.
And we have so many great companies coming into this space, and I know as an MLS myself and talking to other MLSs, we're getting kind of caught up in a backlog of not being able to keep up with all the new products coming in. So it'd be great to be able to speed up that velocity of integrations. I know it's frustrating on the vendor side. It's frustrating on the MLS side too. We'd love to be able to pop all those in, but we are definitely looking for ways to make that faster, and hopefully this is one of those ways that could speed it up for us. So.
Yeah, and actually just when I was coming up here after lunch, there was a MLS, a person from one of the MLSs just saying that they have a vendor and then they have an app with their MLS. And it's so frustrating that some of the technology doesn't go between the app and the web portal, for example, in something like transaction documents, right? Because they don't speak to each other. And, Brian, to your question, I think it's really interesting to just say, what is this? And kick the tire and go, what could this do? Because come to Interop and bring something to us, because this is going to be fun to, we all know how to @ someone. Imagine if you took offers or showings and you could just receive new offer, and everybody who is an agent with a client who's got an interest in that offer could receive it, whether they're with this platform or that platform, and not miss out, and it'd be instantaneous, so highly efficient.
And I do think it fits with the event entity sequencing that we've been talking a lot about. And I think that's a great direction for us to be heading. Plus, it's really easy to tie on the analytics on the back end, so you can get much more information about the performance of whatever you're putting out there for your actions. So, Josh, did you have something else?
Yeah, so protocol over platform, that's very important here. This is all an interface. This is not a technology. You don't have to pick a particular server. You could build your own. There's 25 you could download and run on your own. That's really important. We're not trying to pick a technology. And then what Catharine said is really important. Right now there's a lot of friction. Take an app and interact with the listing. It takes a lot of custom programming, data mapping teams, and what if that was just super easy and they could spend all that time providing value with their products instead? All that money right now is kind of tied up in just maintaining, getting the data, and then getting it back to somewhere else is extremely difficult. So what we really, would be great to see is kind of a rich app ecosystem where you might just spend a weekend building an app that's really cool, and it can provide one value that's really important, and then you could get it launched like that next week. No friction, right? So just reply to this thing, and you're basically done.
Okay, a final thought too, when you have protocol over platform, it's so amazing because where you have that previous friction and you want to maybe keep something in your own court, it actually turns it around when you have a protocol, because then the people who wanted to keep things to themselves actually can't persist in a future environment where everyone is sharing a single protocol. So it opens a way to cooperation that's like a natural open lane for everyone to join in.
Any other questions or comments? Otherwise, thanks, and we'll see you all at the Catalina Wine Mixer later tonight. So have a good one.